people were talking about studios and distributors as the traditional gatekeepers. And in the AI world, I think the gatekeepers are actually the algorithms.
This is Justine Moore. Half her job is investing in AI at A16Z. The other half is covering it on X. In this episode, how the algorithm decides what you watch, why AI still needs human taste, and a whole bunch more.
Even if people are submitting more slop, it won't be flooding our feeds because the algorithms will direct us towards the overall higher quality content or content that matches our unique interests more. Agents may be eventually controlling a lot of generations. You want to make sure the agents think highly of your model and it's relatively accessible and they don't consider it to be too expensive. They're not great at taste. We don't know the answer yet of how large the market is going to be for generative media.
From VP Land at AI on the Lot. This is Inside the AI Studio.
Justine, good to see you.
Great to see you too.
One of my favorite X follows. How would you describe, I kind of know what you do, but how would you describe what you do, but also what you track?
Yes, I am an investor at A16Z, which is a VC firm, mostly in the Bay Area, but kind of all over the country now, actually. Invest in a bunch of creative tools companies like 11 Labs, Korea, Hydra, Black Forest Labs. And I'm also a creator myself on the side. So when the first Stable Diffusion came out, which I think was like fall 2022, I got super interested in AI image generation, kind of fell down the rabbit hole on that. And then that led me to audio, eventually video, 3D. And I love just making things with all of the tools and teaching other people who are less technical or who don't come from creative backgrounds what they can do with everything we have today.
What are some of the trends that you've been seeing more recently, just in kind of the tool sets in the AI space and use cases or kind of markets for AI content?
Yeah, it's been such an interesting time for AI content. I think for a while, we had images that were pretty good, like the Balenciaga Pope moment that went mega viral, and then we had the Ghibli moment. But it wasn't until video got really good that I think we started really seeing AI content explode everywhere. Now I would say, and I know this is partially biased by the fact that I watch a lot of AI content, but the majority of my Instagram Reels feed is AI, and I have friends all the time sending me AI videos that pop up on their feeds, which definitely wasn't happening a year ago. And I think the models getting a lot better has unlocked a bunch of different use cases. It's an interesting challenge for companies working in this space to decide what they want to focus on. I think a lot of the Chinese video models are really good. Some of the US labs are trying to compete, and others are choosing to focus on different markets, like you alluded to. We're seeing a mix from people who are really focusing on consumer meme creation and casting yourself in videos and sort of the lowest end of the market, like mass market consumer, all the way to people saying, I'm going to build a tool that's exclusively for professional filmmakers who want to use AI in their production. So we're going to have a lot of enterprise features, team collaboration, really strict mapping outs of shots and asset provenance and things like that that a consumer would never use, which makes it a super exciting time for the space because there's room for many different companies focusing on different use cases and target customers.
From a investment perspective, how big is the M&E space relative to all the other markets? Kind of a smaller use case for this industry versus robotics or industrial applications? Yeah,
it's a unknown question, I think, of how, or we don't know the answer yet of how large the market is going to be for generative media. I think the early signs point to it being huge because there's so many different potential users and because there's just so many different people who are actually interested and using any of these tools in their daily lives. Like people are generating millions of images in ChatGPT, in Gemini, like products like Nano Banana and GPT-4o Image are reaching probably the most viral products I've maybe ever seen. And I've been a consumer investor for 10 plus years in terms of just absolutely dominating consumer attention. And then I think also the traditional media and entertainment industry is very large. If a lot of that spend can be captured with AI, and then also a lot of like ancillary categories. I think when people think media and entertainment, they sometimes just think like movies or TV shows, but there's a lot of content that is produced, whether it's marketing materials or whether it's like learning and development within a company or educational materials that can be made faster, cheaper, better with AI.
The other thing, and you kind of talk about like watching habits in media, different types of media, and then you are watching a lot of AI content on short verticals. Here at the conference, the most people we've been talking to is like focused on, big traditional, like we're making movies, we're making TV shows. Yeah. How can we just make that like for less money? But what are people's viewing habits like, and is that shifting, and is that also more of an existential threat of like, they just want, if people are cool with like AI generated short clips?
Yeah.
Have you been seeing this kind of shift in like watching and viewing habits?
For sure. I mean, I think the cool thing about AI media is it allows a lot more people to become creators once they have an idea. So like Fruit Love Island was a thing where there was a fan of the traditional Love Island franchise who recreated it as if all of the characters were kind of fruit instead. And there was a ton of drama. It went super viral on TikTok. Like those sorts of things are really interesting and kind of newly enabled with AI. I think they might take some of the audience and viewership from, traditional movies and TV, but they definitely won't take all of it. Kind of similar to what we saw when UGC media merged, like YouTube and TikTok. It didn't completely kill movies and TV. We just sort of fragmented our time between different things.
Do you feel like there's a risk of AI generated content, the ease of making it, and sort of agents and bots and stuff like that, just like churning out stuff, that it just kind of drowns the feeds? And
yeah, it's a great question. I think I was thinking about this earlier because people were talking about studios and distributors as the traditional gatekeepers, as the judges of quality of content and what people should watch. And in the AI world, I think the gatekeepers are actually the algorithm that on all of the social media platforms that we use, because they super carefully watch, like 10 people have seen this video. What percentage of those people watched until the end? What percentage clicked through to the creator's page? What percentage clicked not interested? Like these platforms, even, I'm sure we've all experienced it. You watch a video and you scroll and it's like, did you like this? Did you not like this? Like, did you think it was interesting or useful? I think they're collecting a ton of data to make sure that even if people are submitting more slop or really low quality content to these platforms, it won't be flooding our feeds because the algorithms will direct us towards either the overall higher quality content or content that matches our unique interests more.
You also track microdramas.
Yes.
What are you seeing in that industry?
Microdramas is crazy. So in China, the revenue from microdramas is already bigger than the domestic box office. And in the US, it's growing quite quickly. So we get a bunch of data on App Store growth, and both in terms of number of users and revenue. And a lot of the microdrama apps like Real Short and DramaBox were like some of the fastest growing apps in the US last year and did enormous amounts of revenue. I think they're like, I'm personally not a huge microdrama watcher because I don't love the romance genre, but I think there's a ton of people for whom they just love that content, similar to the audience of people who consume romance books. And microdramas are a really cool and engaging way to get that in a video format. I think they're like the perfect form of content to do with AI because they don't have to be the highest production value. It's often relatively limited casts. So you can do things like shoot in a soundstage with a few people and then generate backgrounds with AI, or dub into different languages with AI, or things like that. And also thanks to AI, we're starting to see the microdrama companies be able to expand into more genres beyond romance, things like sci-fi or fantasy.
Is there a genre where, like, if that did pop up as microdramas, you would be more likely to watch or engage with that? And that's probably the case with other people.
Yeah, I love anything animal related. There's a ton of Sheep Detective content here at the Culver Theater today, and I've been like taking selfies with all of it. So like any animal related microdrama. I've also taken a few pitches from companies who are working on anime microdramas, which is really cool because anime is a giant market and tends to be more male centric, whereas romance tends to be more female centric, and that's where the microdramas have focused thus far.
Kind of from the tool set of the app level, what kind of have you been seeing work in sort of the AI creation space, and where do you think there's still gaps that aren't being addressed?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that's going really well, partially because the quality of the models is improving and it's sort of a rising tide lifts all boats. A lot of folks are training their own models, but clearly they learn from and are encouraged by competition from other folks who are doing really well. And then the app layer companies, obviously, who host the models, as the models get better, their own products get better. I think we're seeing more specialization in products now, which is really exciting. So thinking about like if you're a professional filmmaker, do you need essentially more of like a 3D set or world where you can direct a camera with more control, or you can show different views of the same scene or things like that? And I hope we see more people continue building those really deep products over time. I also think there's a lot to do in kind of narrative and agentic storytelling. So right now, I mean, we've all experienced like you're trying to tell a story, you make a bunch of images, and for every image you have to re-upload the same character reference, or for every video you have to figure out how to get the same voice for the character, like those sorts of things that make it really hard to tell a longer form story today. And I think part of that is as the models improve and get better at longer form generations, that will naturally improve. But I think there's a lot that can be done on sort of like the harness is what we call it, the tooling and the structure that controls these models to allow us to get to better narrative outputs more quickly with like less friction in the prompting.
Also, speaking of agents, what have you been seeing with that, and just different kind of the needs of like apps being able to make themselves open or accessible to agents?
So I would say agents right now are really good at defined tool calls or tasks. So take this image and generate an audio track, generate a video, and then apply the lip sync of the audio track to the video. Or take these 5 photos and make a video flashing through different clips if it's like a house tour or something like that. They're not great at taste. So the human still very much needs to direct them and provide guidance. And sometimes that's hard when you're working with an agent because they'll go through the whole thing, they'll give you the output, and you'll be like, technically this is what I told you to do, but it kind of sucks. So I clearly need to give you more guidance and we need to do this differently. I think there's a lot of interesting work to be done there around like, how do you guide what an agent produces and what style it produces? How do you give them feedback so they do more of good things and less of bad things over time? And I think every sort of model and tool company is trying to make themselves accessible to agents, just out of this opportunity, basically, that agents may be eventually controlling a lot of generations, and agents may be selecting when a user says generate an image. What if the agent is picking what that image model is? If you're an image model provider, you want to make sure the agents think highly of your model and it's relatively accessible and they don't consider it to be too expensive. This is something actually we've seen a lot more on the LLM side of things with products like OpenClaw, where a lot of developer tools have really benefited from being favored by the agents. And so I think we'll see something similar in media.
So like more like if you don't know a specific solution for the thing you want, you're talking to your agent like, I need to make an image of my product, but you don't know the specifics of not a banana or what model.
Totally.
I don't know how to, like the SEO of...
People call it GEO, like,
right, yeah.
But I guess kind of like a corollary with things we've seen with the earlier LLM agents is, say you're a vibe coder and you're like, I want to make this website and I want to have a login and I want to have a database that stores the information. The agent is going to pick who hosts your website. The agent's going to pick the authentication provider. The agent is going to pick the database provider. And something similar will probably happen in media, where the agent is selecting providers if the user is not sophisticated enough to specify.
I went through that exact process.
I have many times, and sometimes I'm like, this thing isn't working, and it's because the thing you recommended is broken.
I mean, when it works for the companies that I ended up signing up for, and the system works, and it's like, okay, got me to that spot. Yeah, it made sense on a technical end. I didn't think about that in reverse of like, how would you, if you were like, I want to create something, and you don't know where to start, what's the agent going to recommend or pick for you?
I think the interesting thing today is like a lot of people are still generating media who are new to the space through OpenAI and Google, like through the Gemini app or the ChatGPT app. And those companies have the advantage of like, they have a ton of consumer distribution and they have their own models. So they're going to push people to their own models to generate. Whereas if we have kind of more surfaces that are not owned by the big model companies, then it very much becomes a question of like where the agents are directing you to.
Yeah, but also on some level, when it comes to like the model itself, it's like all roads lead to a handful of the big models just because there's only a handful of companies that can make these really powerful big models.
Yes.
I've wondered, it's like if you are sort of more the platform layer where you're like connecting the models and sort of your advantage is just like, do you have a nicer to use interface?
Yeah.
And then with the rise of vibe coding, how does that, if people can just build their personal solutions?
I think there will be different solutions for different types of users. For a user who just wants to generate a few one-off images, they might not need a tool with a really complex interface. For a user who wants to generate multiple interconnected images or a narrative or then animate images, they probably want things like a canvas and a timeline that are like much more complex to vibe code and to maintain.
Yeah, cool. Justine, thanks so much.
Awesome.
It was great.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Yeah.